Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Moving Picture Show. I'm David.
And I'm Caleb.
And today we're going to talk about Van Helsing. But before we get into today's movie, Caleb is going to give a word from our sponsors.
We don't have any sponsors.
What? What am I doing all this for? Well, we're back with another exciting episode of the Moving Picture Show, Caleb. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite childhood films, Van Helsing. And I told you to come up with a synopsis, as we usually do for these things. So, do you want to go ahead and read yours, and then I can read mine?
All right, my synopsis. Monster hunter Dr. Van Helsing is sent to Transylvania to vanquish Count Dracula, meeting up with a sexy, yet lethal, vampire killer. The pair battle a staggering array of supernatural predators. That is actually not mine. That is the synopsis on Amazon Prime.
I like that. Sexy yet lethal.
Yet lethal.
This is the same words I had in my profile in eHarmony. Well, do you want me to read mine?
Yes,
now?
why don't you go ahead?
Okay. In this Halloween special of the Twilight Saga, Count Dracula finds his soulmate in actress Cate Blanchett, who also happens to be viciously pursued by famous musical star Clint Jackman. Hilarity ensues as Clint murders everyone the Count takes a romantic interest in, and I do mean everyone. The film stars Clint as the titular Indiana Van Helsing, Jim Carrey as Dracula, Frankenpunker from Zivaz, and a hungover version of the Chuck E. Cheese rat.
Sounds about right. Bit of a spoiler alert, but you know.
Well, I do what I do. But, so the main reason for this video is we're going to talk about why we think Van Helsing is actually a very underrated movie. But first, I thought we should talk about the film itself and, why it's actually not a bad movie. You know, I mean, as far as filmmaking goes, I guess I can start. As far as, filmmaking goes, you can say, yeah, it's kind of a pile of crap. But,
who's to say what crap is?
and that's true. That's true. And we're about to say what crap is not. And it is not Van Helsing. But as far as the filmmaking goes, it's super cheesy and over the top, but it's perfectly cheesy and over the top for what the subject matter is. Does that make sense?
I mean, yeah. I will be honest, you did not tell me that we were going to be defending this movie, so I have a whole list of things about why this movie is terrible.
Well, okay. Well, then you have to start this, and then
we'll
kidding. Run this like a courthouse drama.
I'm just kidding. I very much enjoy Van Helsing.
But you hadn't watched it since you were a kid. You said.
Had not. Yeah, I think the last time I watched it was probably 18, 17. So.
That was forever ago.
Many moons ago.
You fossil.
Before I had all my white hair.
Yeah. Van Helsing is it's like an anomaly of a movie, right? It's the perfect early 2000s guilty pleasure movie, but I'd say it kind of transcends guilty pleasure. It's actually a good movie, I think. For what it's trying to be. It's not it's not like a Christopher Nolan movie, but it's not trying to be. It knows what it is. And what it is okay, so have you ever seen, obviously you grew up watching the Universal Monster movies like I did.
Mm-hmm.
The original Frankenstein, Dracula, Wolfman, Creature from Black Lagoon, they're all classic. Those are actually great films, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you get kind of later on in the series, you have Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein. Those are all great. And then it just kind of slips into B movie territory. and then you have the very first cinematic universe where like they all come together in House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, and then the cream of the crop, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein.
Of course.
But like this movie is more akin to those later films. Mm-hmm. Like it's bringing all the classic monsters together, just like those films did, but on like a movie budget with modern day effects, and that's all it needs to be. Because what it is it's not trying to remake Frankenstein or Bride of Frankenstein. It's just trying to be the most epic love letter to those films that it can be. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I think it succeeds in every way in that. Like, in my notes here, I have like even the CGI. Like one of the complaints that I hear a lot about this movie is that the CGI is just like over the top and it's overused and all this stuff. But I'm like, use all the CGI, throw all this. Usually I'm against CGI, but in this movie it makes sense. Throw all the CGI you can at the screen because it's the Universal monsters all together. This is pretty much House of Frankenstein, but they've never had CGI for those movies, so it's just use everything. Like, make it as over the top as possible because we'll probably never get another movie like this, honestly. Mm-hmm. And the CGI, it's not great, but it's not terrible either. It's actually a lot better CGI than I see in a lot of modern movies. Like, I didn't see The Flash, but apparently The Flash had really terrible CGI. Is that true? Because you saw it, I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The CGI in The Flash it was kind of supposed to be bad to an extent. Like, I didn't think it was terrible.
That's what the director said, but don't you think that's kind of a
cop-out? The scenes that the CGI is really bad, it's, like, supposed to be bad, in my opinion. But that's neither here nor there. I think you're right. I think that Van Helsing succeeds at what it's trying to do, and I actually think it knows what it is pretty well. I think one of the big problems the critics had when they watched it was they were like, this movie is trying to be really serious and it's trying to be really, all put together, and it's just not. It's not a good movie in that aspect. And I'm like, well, but the problem is when we watch a movie like Godzilla vs. Kong, mm-hmm. right? It's a ridiculous premise. It's a ridiculous movie, but it knows what it is.
Yeah, see, I'd say that's a perfect comparison, what you just said. This is like Godzilla. This is a type of movie like Godzilla vs. Kong, but also it's kind of an old-fashioned movie in mm-hmm. the sense that, like, we don't see movies like this anymore. Like, we see movies kind of like it, like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. Mm-hmm. But this movie is very much like, and this, even the director said this when the movie was coming out. I remember him saying this is more like an Indiana Jones movie. And Van Helsing he's not a complex character in this movie, and he's not supposed to be. That's another criticism I've heard about this movie is that Van Helsing, he's a plank of wood. He's a boring character. But that doesn't matter, because Indiana Jones is kind of a plank of wood, too. They're mm-hmm. both vessels to tell the story, and they're both just kind of like your ideal masculine hero. But nowadays, we can't have, like, an ideal masculine hero like Van Helsing or Indiana Jones without, like, kind of making them screw a bunch of stuff up for laughs. But in this movie, like, there is humor, but it's never at, like, our hero's expense, Like, he's just supposed to be, like, your archetype. What is the archetype? Is that what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, sure.
Hero, if I'm even using that word right. But he's the guy that you're just supposed to see this movie through his eyes, mm-hmm. And the point of the movie isn't Van Helsing. The point of the movie is to get all these monsters that we grew up loving together in this movie with modern makeup, modern effects that we've never gotten to see before, and it's awesome.
Yeah,
it's a great time.
Yeah, I had a great time watching it again, and it's funny because I hadn't watched it in so long that a lot of the parts of the movie I actually forgot what happened. So, for instance, during the scene when they have the chariot, right, and they're trying to get the monster away,
and the horses, literally fly like Superman.
Yep, I did not remember that. I was like, oh, it was funny because I was thinking of it in normal movie realm, and I was like, oh, the bridge is out, they're all gonna fall. Oh wait,
oh no, Transylvanian horses have superpowers.
They're fine. Yeah, so but I didn't even recognize that there was the other chariot. Like, I completely forgot about that.
Yeah,
like I completely forgot about a lot of it, and I actually thought that they pull it off really well. They do a good job. I don't know, there's a decent amount of twists and turns in the movie. They do a good job. Mm-hmm. I have my criticisms and my complaints, but
let's hear them. Level it up. I think we've slipped into showing that it's not showing that it is underrated.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure.
So
yeah.
let's just go into the criticisms now.
Did you know Van Helsing is the second highest budget for a horror movie ever? Even coming
is
out in 2004.
Is it qualified as a horror movie?
That's technically the genre.
That's bizarre. Because I was literally gonna say that it's pretty. It's not impossible, but it's really difficult to take the classic monsters, Dracula and Frankenstein, and make them scary to an audience nowadays. You really have to do a lot of work, let alone take them all and put them into one movie together. So I think going more of an action route was the correct decision. It was the easiest decision and the most correct decision. And yeah, I just don't think you would be able to make it like a horror film.
No, I don't think so. One thing I did think when I was watching it again too, if Van Helsing came out today, right now obviously it's a bit dated, but it's 20 years old, and honestly for a 20-year-old movie, it looks pretty good.
Yeah, the effects are great.
It looks pretty good for
really
20
good.
years.
Yeah.
If it came out today, do you think that critics would have the same criticism?
Oh, 100%.
You think they would?
For sure, dude. For sure. Critics have their heads up their butts.
Yeah.
Especially nowadays.
I was just wondering because I feel like there's been, ever since after King of the Monsters, Godzilla came out, there was somewhat of a shift, I've felt, to where critics are kind of, not all the time, but some critics anyway, are now watching movies in the intention they're supposed to be watching them in. Which always drove me crazy, because it was like, when King of the Monsters came out, and I know we're talking a lot about Godzilla right now, which shows
it's a pretty good comparison. They're kind of in the same vein a little bit.
Critics hated
classic monsters.
That's right. Critics hated King of the Monsters. Right?
Yeah.
They hated it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, if you're going into King of the Monsters and expecting to watch like The Hunt for Red October or some, I don't know, some other movie, right?
Yeah.
Then you're probably not going to like that movie.
Yeah.
But you watch the movie based on what its intention is supposed to be.
Yeah. And understanding that you're not going to recreate like a perfect film. Like, you're not going into Van Helsing, like I said earlier, you're not going into Van Helsing expecting 1931's Frankenstein.
Sure.
I didn't as a kid, and I grew up with those movies, and I love those movies, but I went into Van Helsing when I was 13 years old expecting, like, okay, this is going to be maximum cheese factor, and it's going to be amazing.
Oh, it was. I remember going to the theater. It was you and I and Dad. We went to Elmwood Theater. You remember?
Yeah.
And,
I remember.
Yep.
Because the freaking screen got cut off for the first scene of the best scene in the whole movie, where it's in black and white, and we were only able to see Dracula's chin the entire time because the real messed up.
We were all yelling, the screen's all messed up and it's in black and white. No, but I don't know. That was such a good movie going experience.
Yeah.
I
still remember
I was 11 years old.
I still remember driving back from that movie.
Yeah, I remember we'd watched that movie so many times as kids. But anyway, I have a lot of good things to say about this movie, but I do have a few criticisms.
Let's hear 'em.
So I'll go through those really
Lay
quick.
it on me.
So, in my opinion, the worst part of the whole movie is actually the masquerade scene.
Really?
Yep, that is my least favorite part of the movie. Now, I will say...
Explain.
Well, I will say, when I watched the movie, especially this time, I was like, it'd be really cool to go to a masquerade like that. That's really cool.
Right? Yeah.
Which I thought that. But then, as you watch the scene, and as you watch kind of everything that happens in that scene, it's obviously very ridiculous, over the top, right?
Yeah.
Hugh Jackman is a trapeze artist just flying around, and there's fire breathers and everything else.
Yeah, naturally.
But the scene actually adds nothing to the movie. There's nothing that scene adds.
I don't think I've ever thought about that, because they still... Hold on. Wait. No, they find the monster, but... They could have done that without that scene.
They find the monster, but you don't even see them find the monster.
Mm-hmm.
You just all of a sudden they walk in and they're like, "Hey, we got Frankenstein!"
Yeah.
And they walked into the masquerade.
Well, wait. The whole point of the masquerade scene is to rescue Kate Beckinsale while hiding the monster. Yes,
but I don't see why Kate Beckinsale had to be captured in the first place, because he rescues her in the very next scene. They capture the monster in the very next scene, and you don't see them do it. I would have much rather seen them try to capture the monster than see them, see Dracula kind of fondling Kate Beckinsale. And they have a really awkward kiss, which I was like, and I was watching it on my phone, and it froze like right when they were kissing, and I was like, this is it reminds me of Dumb and Dumber when he's like kissing.
Oh, yeah. Hey, same actor, right?
Yeah, right.
Actually, on that note, another criticism that a lot of people throw at, and I kind of hinted at it in my synopsis, is people say that Richard Roxburgh, I think is his name, who plays Dracula in the movie, like he's really over dramatic and over the top. But I love his performances. I think his performance as Dracula is just one of the best parts of the movie. Like, and a couple of his lines, are like really dramatic. But again, it just works with the overall movie, and he's a great villain. Like, you just kind of hate him through the whole thing.
Yeah, I really didn't. Honestly, I like him as Dracula, like you said, and I didn't mind his acting because, to me, Dracula is probably more of the theatrical type anyway.
Yeah, he's a very.
So I was like, I think it's fine.
He's very much a drama queen.
But anyway, so that was one of my criticisms with it, at least the masquerade scene. I don't mind the scene being in the movie, but you could chop that scene out and save 15 to 20 minutes of the movie, and it actually adds nothing.
Replace it with a quick scene where they're trying to get the monster.
Something like that is what I would have rather seen, right? But that, I mean, it is a cool scene, and it was funny because when I was watching the scene, I was like, well, Kate Beckinsale does fly in the trapeze later in the movie. Maybe she learned how to do it there. She watched Hugh Jackman. Right.
Let's talk about some of the cons with that final sequence too at Dracula's castle when the Frankenstein monster falls like 18 stories, hits like 8 cables on the way down, and then and everything's covered in snow because Kate Beckinsale does the same thing. She like falls down this thing and then catches with one hand on this snowy ledge. I'm like, no. So
my favorite part of that whole scene, that whole ending sequence, is when Kate Beckinsale, they have their who's got the wolf serum? Who is that? Who's that character?
Carl,
yeah. Carl has the wolf serum.
It's freaking who does he play in Lord of the Rings? Faramir.
Yep. Yeah. So he's got, which, by the way, very ironic that he is in that scene, and then they actually burn Kate Beckinsale later in the movie, but that's neither here nor there.
Spoilers.
Anyway, I like how
she dies.
I like how, in this movie I say Van Helsing, Carl, and Kate Beckinsale. I never
what
say
even
Anna.
is her name?
Anyway, the scene where he throws the serum to her.
And then she catches it.
She catches it one hand and she's flying on the trapeze or whatever she's on. I just imagine like Michael Scott when they're throwing the iPod. Oh, no! Van Helsing looking out the window and they're throwing the serum over the edge.
What is that idiot doing? You know what I always thought, even when I was a kid and I saw it for the first time, when she grabs it and she's just like, ugh. Yeah. I literally think she sticks herself with it. I'm like, well, at least she's not going to become a werewolf. But speaking of which, one of the coolest parts of the movie is the way they handle the werewolf, I think.
Yeah.
Listen, all the updates are great. So the actor for Frankenstein gets a little annoying sometimes with how hammy he does the lines. Like, you want to talk about hammy. Dracula's not hammy compared to Frankenstein. The way he talks in this movie can be borderline annoying. But the update, the makeup is great, and they keep enough of the classic look to where you immediately recognize you're like, that's Frankenstein. But and yes, I'm saying Frankenstein, not Frankenstein's monster, because who gives a crap? Seriously, I'm the biggest Frankenstein fan there is, but it's freaking Frankenstein. You know why? Because he's pretty much Dr. Frankenstein's son. What does the son get but the father's last name? There you go. Okay, controversy over.
He even says father in it, right?
Yeah, he does. So I just hate that. People are like, it's always Frankenstein's mom. I'm just like, shut up.
You're like, it's the Forest Moon of Endor too, isn't it?
Yeah. Actually, yeah. But anyway, so what I was saying is one of the best updates though is the way the Wolfman transforms, taking his skin off. You know what it reminded me of? And this is not a bad thing. It reminded me of that Goosebumps episode, Werewolf Skin.
Yep.
Remember that episode? But I just love that, where he's just tearing his skin off. I remember being a kid in the theater and just like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, well, let's go into some things I like then. So I actually love all of the redesigns for the monsters. I think they did a great job. That's the thing. You're dealing with delicate source material of movies that people watched and grew up in, are undeniably classic movies that people love.
Yeah.
So how are you not going to butcher that? Well, you take them a different direction to an extent. And that's what they did. I thought it was great.
And plus, it's like the early 2000s. So, like, in the early 2000s, everything was, like, maximized to, like, the umpteenth degree with, like, design and stuff. And now we've kind of slumped down culturally as far as just, like, well, now we want to, like, pay homage to certain designs, but make it like, kind of tame, you know? We don't want to go, like, the ultra crazy route. And Van Helsing came out at the perfect time where they were just like, no, everything's gonna be designed to the coolest, like, we want Dracula to look like a nightmare hell beast, and the Wolfman's gonna look like a monster.
Right. No, they did great, and I really liked how all the Wolfmen were different colors, kind of
that
people.
was
That
cool.
was really cool.
Yeah, and my favorite one in the whole movie is the first one, the gray one.
The gray one. Yep.
That one is so awesome. But Van Helsing's pretty cool too.
Oh yeah, the really black one.
The brown one does kind of look like a rat though. He's got those weird front teeth. The worst part of the movie is definitely the guy that plays the Wolfman.
Oh yeah,
that guy's the worst actor in the world.
Yeah, he's not good.
Yeah. But he did do pretty good in the transformation. Like
he did, yeah. And actually, I think if I remember correctly, he like wasn't even a real actor or something. He was like a dancer.
Oh really? Was
and
he?
That's what it was about. I remember watching something about the making of this movie, but
he's not in the movie much, so it doesn't ruin everything. But
I will say this: they should have considered Kate Beckinsale for Catwoman, because she always lands on her feet in this movie. Like any situation, she's falling out of a tree.
Flip.
She's falling out.
When the net catches her, is that where she first like flips over?
Flips over.
She does this
on her
ridiculous
feet.
backflip and lands, and she's wearing heels, right?
Yep.
And I'm just like, that's a woman right
Doesn't
there.
matter. She always lands on her feet.
Yep.
That's how it is.
So I mentioned how we grew up watching the Universal Monster movies. Like, we'd watch them every year religiously, just over and over and over again. I remember watching them as a little kid. Grew up with them. And, like, I think I've always been more of a fan. I don't know how you guys all were, because we always loved superheroes and we always loved the monsters. But I think I was always much more of a Universal Monsters fan than I was a superhero fan. And to this day, I'm still the same. Like, I prefer, like, fantasy stuff and sci-fi stuff to, like, superhero stuff. So, like, I think the best way to describe this movie for me is for, like, as a Universal Monsters fan as big as I am, this is, like, my Avengers. You know? This is, like, where they all come together, and it's really cool because you get to see updated versions of them. You know? You grew up with the black and white films, but now you get to see them in living color and CGI that's all over the place, like I said. But this is pretty much the Avengers for monster fans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I was growing up. I mean, I feel like for us, it was superheroes, it was Universal Monsters, or it was Jurassic Park. Pretty much the three, so.
Yeah, but we're not going to get the Jurassic Park Avengers movie anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the best part of the movie has to be the soundtrack is amazing. It's such a good soundtrack. I still listen.
Dude, I was going to bring that up. I forgot. The soundtrack is phenomenal. I was listening to it today to prepare for this, and I was just like, I couldn't stop. Like, even when I was driving back to the office, I was just like, I can't stop listening to this music. It is so, like, adrenaline pumping, and just, like, and it also captures the feeling of the Universal Monsters. Like, it's very epic and orchestral, you know, and, like, almost old-fashioned, but, like, I don't know how to explain it. It's so epic.
Great soundtrack's amazing. The whole ambiance of the movie, as far as Transylvania and kind of like the whole area, it is just it's how I would imagine Transylvania being if I ever went there. You know, really foggy, really like full of pine trees, and just very, very creepy ambience that they really, I feel like, pulled off really well. Just overall, my favorite part of the movie, honestly, is just the feel of the movie. I feel like it feels like a Halloween horror scary movie, right? But it's like action based as well.
It feels like an epic Halloween movie. You know, you have your classic Halloween movies, The Nightmare Before Christmas, and all this other stuff, like your classic Universal Monster movies. They're very quiet and subdued with, you know, I don't know. But like Van Helsing is along the same lines of like Brendan Fraser's Mummy, which makes sense, the same director, but it's just like an epic Halloween movie. Like how can we take Halloween and just make an awesome adventure film out of it? You know, and it's obviously, like we said, not a perfect film by any means. By filmmaking standards, probably pretty poor, but that's not what it's trying. It knows what it is.
So I do have another criticism. The whole Dracula...
I'm only going to tolerate a few of these, but
yeah, I figured. I've only got a couple. Dracula and Van Helsing having like the historic relationship of like him being Gabriel.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
Like, I was like, it all feels unnecessary to me. You know, because like it's kind of like, oh, we're going to send you there so you can, know your past more.
Yeah.
And it's like, that kind of feels unnecessary.
But it's the little bit of backstory that we get with him. Because other than that, he's literally nothing. He literally is a plank of wood if we don't have that.
Yeah, but I just, to me, I thought Van Helsing was really cool. Like, we already established that he's, like, really BA when he beats Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm like, I don't really need him to have some kind of, like, big backstory.
Yeah.
He's just kind of like a BA character who's going to go in and crush some heads.
He's the vessel. He's the Mad Max of the
so
story.
I guess I don't need it personally, but I guess other people might,
I don't know. I think they were... So this was originally, according to what I've heard, this was originally supposed to explode into a huge expanded universe. Mm-hmm. And so I think they actually greenlit 2 sequels for it, and then those didn't happen because of the negative critical reaction. I think it did okay box office-wise. But anyway, I think they were going to expand on his story some more in the sequels, but obviously we didn't get those. So they should have, if they were going to give him more backstory, they should have given us a little more in this movie. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it would have helped, but I don't mind that much. Like, I don't mind him being like the angel Gabriel in a past life. I think that's, it is what it is.
Right.
Who knows how they would have expanded on it.
It's not a huge criticism. It doesn't bother me that much.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things where I'm like, is this really necessary to the plot? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
It was like kind of like I know you haven't seen The Flash yet, but in the movie, The Flash has this girl he likes, right?
Yeah. Spoilers.
Yeah, that's right. Spoilers, because everyone's gonna go see it.
It's already out.
And I saw it with Blair, and Blair's like, I liked the movie. The only thing was, the thing with the girl that he likes is completely pointless, and he's right.
I actually heard that.
There's no need
review.
for it.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know. I mean, whatever. It can be what it is.
Can we talk about, just really quick, I wanted to mention, getting back to the ending. First of all, I love how they keep Dracula, like his transformation, they keep that a secret all the way until the end.
Yep.
When he's finally revealed. That is super cool. And it's like a huge payoff in the end, kind of like the Jaws shark, Mm-hmm. But
I remember as a kid when Dracula finally transformed, I was just like, holy crap, he is like scary. You know what I mean? Like, this is why he's so scary to everybody,
Yeah, and it is. It's terrifying. I remember Stephen Sommers, the director, saying something like, well, Dracula turns into a bat. I'm not afraid of bats. What if the bat was like 6 feet tall? I did like that. But anyway, Van Helsing, and this is a twist I did not expect. Granted, I was only 13 at the time, but Van Helsing getting bit by the werewolf. Mm-hmm. And then a werewolf being the only thing that can kill Dracula. I actually thought that fit the entire series of Universal Monster movies perfectly with the lore, because how many times has Dracula been killed in the Universal Monsters movies? Mm-hmm. Like 8 million times, right? Even in the Hammer series, he's always coming back somehow, and it just kind of makes sense. I mean, I know that it doesn't flow perfectly, but like it does kind of flow with the idea of Dracula keeps coming back. What can kill this guy? He keeps coming back, and I really love the idea of a werewolf being the only thing that can kill him.
Yeah, so let's talk about the story a little bit, because one of the biggest criticisms I always hear about Van Helsing is the story's so goofy and it's terrible.
Yeah, I heard a critic describe it as like a Saturday morning cartoon once.
So, I'll be honest, I'm 30 years old, and I watched it this last weekend again. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed the crap out of the story. I actually thought it was pretty good, and I picked up on things that I didn't know last time. So, for instance, Dracula's trying to bring his kids to life. Right? That's what he's trying to do. Yeah. And it makes sense because Dracula's dead, his wives are dead, so they can't bore living offspring. That's the big problem, right? Yeah. So that's why they need Frankenstein, because Dr. Frankenstein was the one who cracked the code on how to bring life. Yeah. Like, I actually liked that.
Yeah, which also fits with the classic Universal Monster lore, because they say in Son of Frankenstein that the Frankenstein monster is made to live forever. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess when people complain about the goofy story and all that, I'm kind of like, I think it's pretty good. I've seen a lot worse stories done from Hollywood.
Again, if you're going into it expecting a serious film, you're going to think, because even I can admit, it's kind of silly that Dracula's brides like lay eggs, right?
Much. That's silly.
But like, you gotta understand what you're getting into. You're watching House of Frankenstein, not Bride of Frankenstein. You're watching House of Dracula, you know, not what is it, Son of Dracula or Dracula's daughter?
I did like the line, what is this? Well, he's like, a man trapped with 3 gorgeous women for 400 years?
Yeah. Which one is the good one? No, I'm stuck. It's either Son of Dracula or Dracula's daughter. One of them is considered good, and one of them is considered bad. I don't remember. Yeah. Anyway, it's neither here nor there. But yeah, that is a hilarious line.
Yeah, I mean, I just didn't think the story was that bad, and it's not, like you said, it's not some, you know, amazing storytelling, whatever. But like, it's not bad. Yeah,
it's not film. Citizen Crane.
Yeah. But it's not bad for the film.
That's a movie, isn't it?
Citizen Crane. It's the reenactment of Citizen Kane with cranes.
That's a terrible joke. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Yeah, we'll cut it out.
Brian will listen to it later and disown you as his father.
We'll cut it out later. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I enjoyed Van Helsing a lot. I do not think it deserves any. I don't think it deserves a lot of the criticism that it gets.
Yeah.
You know? I have my criticisms of the movie.
Yeah.
Right? It's not perfect, but.
I mean, I'm sure. Look it up on Rotten Tomatoes. What does it have on Rotten Tomatoes?
It's at 23%. I looked at
23%. Yeah. That's absurd.
Yeah.
I would say a fair rating would be like 65, 70, something like that.
Yeah.
You know, I would think it was equally absurd if they rated 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'd be like, no, that's crazy. It's not 100%, but it's definitely not 23%. That's ridiculous. There was talks of a sequel a long time ago. Here we are, what, 15 years later? I don't know how. What is
almost 20 years. Came out in 2004.
Holy cow, are you serious?
Yep, so.
I am so old. If they were to make a sequel, if they were to greenlight a sequel for this movie, a direct sequel right now, what would you want to see 20 years later?
20 years later, so.
Yeah. Because I was thinking about this today.
I mean,
a sequel for like modern audiences that like stays true to the original, you know.
Yeah, I mean, Hugh Jackman looks the same as he did 20 years ago.
So just make it take place the next day.
You can, I mean, doesn't
I've killed Dracula.
It doesn't have to be 20 years. Is my point.
His alarm clock is going off. That was quite the night last night.
Now it's time to hunt the creature from the Black Lagoon.
He was supposed to be in the scene. They actually. Hugh Jackman said they filmed a scene. Creature from Black Lagoon was supposed to show up in this movie in a cameo, and they actually filmed a scene for it and then cut it out at the last second. So I would love to see that footage if that story is true.
Yeah, I would. I mean, personally, I would love to see, and this is just partially because I really like swamp situations, especially for horror genre situations. So I would love to see him actually go and something to do with the creature from the Black Lagoon in like a Mississippi swamp or something.
Yeah,
that would be really cool.
Okay, I was having similar thoughts. I was thinking like maybe Hugh Jackman is 20 years older. He's given up monster hunting. Let's say killing Dracula was the last monster hunt he ever did because he saw what it costs. You know, lots of people died, and so he gives up on that, but he's still working for the monastery or whatever it is, and he's training up other monster hunters like proteges, you know. And in this movie, he has to take the mantle back up. He's 20 years older, so he's a little rough around the edges, but it's because the main villain of this movie is what's the mummy's name? Imhotep. They have to go to Egypt. Maybe a secret area in Egypt where there's a different pyramid that nobody knows about. Maybe it's underground. I don't know. But there's also an area called the Black Lagoon. I know that the Black Lagoon is supposed to be in South America, but in this movie it can be in part of the Nile or something. I don't know. But anyway, so yeah, have Imhotep, because he's a big evil bad guy. You know, he's not as powerful as Dracula, but he's definitely imposing intellectually, right? Make him the main bad guy. Bring in the creature from the Black Lagoon. Bring Anna back as a vampire, maybe? Would be kind of cool. I think she was originally supposed to come back as a vampire in the sequel. And then... Oh, her name's Anna, by the way.
Who's Anna? You mean Kate Beckinsale?
Yeah. But maybe it's Van Helsing, one of his proteges or whatever, and maybe have the Invisible Man as an ally. You know? Like maybe open the film with like a training where the Invisible Man is like the bad guy, and you think that like they're going after the Invisible Man like he was going after Mr. Hyde in the beginning, but then it just turns out, oh, fake out, it's a training sequence that Hugh Jackman's kind of like overseeing, and the Invisible Man is actually working with them.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
That would be kind of cool, I think.
What are your options for other Universal monsters that you could bring in? Obviously, the Mummy is what we talked about.
The Mummy would be an excellent... Maybe end the film with a hint. Just a hint. You don't have to have Richard Roxburgh back, but maybe Dracula comes back. You know, just a hint of it. Because you don't want to be, like, super cheesy, stealing from Marvel, like, end credits. Oh, wait for the next one! Because that's always embarrassing. Like, especially if that movie bombed, like if Van Helsing 2 bombed. It's always embarrassing to like watch that movie years later and be like a dark universe.
Well, I'll tell you.
That worked well.
So how about this? How about let's put together a script for Van Helsing 2. All right.
Yeah.
You and I will pitch it to Hugh Jackman. Let's literally have the movie end with Hugh Jackman hanging off a cliff and be like, it's a bit of a cliffhanger ending.
And he's singing while he's doing it.
Luke said that the Spider-Verse movie, the new one that came out, ends on a super cliffhanger. I haven't seen it.
That's what he hated about it. Yeah. I've heard it's a good movie if you were going and expecting a cliffhanger, but if you're not going and expecting a cliffhanger, it's kind of disappointing.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. It is kind of frustrating because I do feel like there are lots of other things they could have done with that.
Yeah.
That whole universe.
Yeah.
And it kind of all got
lower the budget. Lower the budget a little bit, you know? Like, understand what your audience is, and then, like, hey, if that movie was successful, do spin-off movies with the other monsters and make those lower budget, like Blumhouse movies, you know?
It did make one of the best Xbox games of all time.
Oh my gosh. We should talk about that for 2 seconds here, but freaking the original Xbox game for Van Helsing based on the movie is one of the most fun games in the world. You literally just shoot everything, and it's super satisfying.
Yeah, it was a very, very well done game. I told David when I started watching Van Helsing the movie, I was like, I just want to go play the game. That's all.
It's so simple, which is perfect for a guy like me because I'm not a gamer, but like that game is one of the few games that I have played all the way through and enjoyed every second of it. But anyway, we should probably wrap this up now. So Caleb, the question I always ask at the end of these is the movie worth a watch or is it not worth a watch?
I would say it's absolutely worth a watch. At least one.
At least one. I would say obviously worth a watch, clearly from my end, but you know I watch it every year in October, so
yeah, just go into the
nostalgia.
movie. Just go into the movie, kick back, get some popcorn, you know, get your favorite drink, and just enjoy the movie.
Set out your NECA Universal Monster toys in front of you, you know, and you're just gonna have a great time.
And shut off your brain for gosh sake.
Yeah,
right?
it's a wonderful. Understand it for what it is. It is a wonderful love letter to the Universal Monster franchise from days gone by. You know, don't go into it expecting Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or Bram Stoker's Dracula. Go into it knowing what you're gonna get. A perfect love letter to the perfect movies of the past, and it is supremely underrated.
And if you ever have to ride a horse in your life, you will be humming that tune from the main theme.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. Well, that's all we got. See you next time.